August 1939. Princeton, New Jersey, United States. The room was eerily silent. Outside, the unrelenting chorus of cicadas poured down. Yet inside that study, the air was ice-cold, as if it had been severed from the flow of time itself. On the desk lay a letter addressed to the President of the United States. It contained no mathematical equations, nor poems praising the harmony of the universe. Instead, it described a trigger of destruction such as humanity had never before laid hands upon. Mr. President, a new, extremely powerful type of bomb may be constructed in the near future. It is possible that Nazi Germany is already embarking on research into this. The old man's hand gripping the pen trembled ever so slightly. A shock of disheveled white hair. Deeply etched wrinkles. The man the world called a genius and revered as a symbol of peace, Albert Einstein, was about to let the ink drop that would definitively change the history of the world. If he signed, the world would never return to what it once was. Under that overwhelming pressure, the old scientist's memory was suddenly pulled back to a quiet nursery from 80 years ago. That day when he was 5. His father brought a small gift to the boy, who was lying in bed sick. A humble brass compass that fit in the palm of his hand. It should have been nothing more than a toy. But what struck the boy's heart was a shock akin to terror. No matter how much he tilted the box, the needle stubbornly pointed north. There was no finger touching it, no wall obstructing it, no invisible force he could perceive. Yet, something existed there that acted upon the object with certainty. There are hidden rules in this universe, invisible to our eyes, untouchable by our hands. That shudder in that very moment was where it all began. He only wanted to know the secrets of the universe. He wanted to hear the most beautiful, most simple song of harmony that supported the world from behind the scenes. That was all. And yet why? Why was the equation he reached through pure curiosity now about to become the first cry of a monster that would burn humanity to ash? This is a story of light and shadow, of a man captivated by the beauty of the cosmos, only to be betrayed by that very beauty. Let us wind back the hands of the clock. 1905. Einstein was not yet the scientist whose name would be etched in history. He was merely a 26-year-old, unremarkable clerk working at the patent office in Bern, Switzerland. The scientific community of that time was filled with such brazen confidence. The major laws of physics have all been discovered. All that remains are minor corrections to the data. A universe like a precision clockwork, built by the great predecessors. Everyone believed in that perfected puzzle, never doubting it for a second. However, in the eyes of the young patent clerk, there were minute cracks running through that wall that was supposed to be perfect. Odd reports were coming in from laboratories. Light was not behaving according to existing theories. The existence of the atom, the smallest unit of matter, was being dismissed by established scientists as nothing more than a convenient illusion. Einstein dared to point his finger at the cracks that everyone else ignored as mere minor bugs, determined to pry them open. Every night, after finishing his obligatory patent reviews, his solitary journey of thought would begin at his shabby desk. There are singularities in the history of science. The greatest of these was this year 1905. After putting away the documents for the strange inventions that arrived daily, when the 26-year-old Einstein sat at his meager desk, the world had absolutely no idea what was happening inside his brain. Within the span of just a few months, 4 papers were published one after another. A big bang of knowledge that historians would later come to call the Annus Mirabilis, the miracle year. The first door to open was an adventure revolving around the tiny fragments that compose the world. Imagine a glass of water perfectly still. Drop a few grains of pollen into it. Everyone would assume that the pollen would simply continue to float silently on the surface. Because the water is not being stirred, there is no wind, and it seems as though nothing is pushing it. However, scientists looking through microscopes were troubled by a strange phenomenon. The pollen particles never stood still. They kept twitching and trembling irregularly, as if they were living things darting here and there, as if they were being poked from all sides by something invisible. Regarding this phenomenon, known as Brownian motion, intellectuals of the time offered vague excuses. Einstein, faced with this mystery, asked a completely different question. What if water is not a smooth liquid? The answer he derived was audacious. Water is a massive swarm of particles, molecules, and atoms, so small they defy imagination, and they are moving around like mad. They only look like quiet water to the human eye because they are too small to be seen. Countless invisible dancers are delivering hundreds of millions of body blows to the pollen grains every second. That is why the pollen cannot stop its trembling. He could not see atoms directly, but he mathematically proved that those invisible collisions left fingerprints on the stage of reality, the water's surface. The established scientists who sneered that atoms are just a computational convenience were silenced completely by this single paper. The world is woven together by countless tiny pieces. That fact was finally confirmed. Before the excitement of proving the existence of atoms had even cooled, in March of that same year, Einstein stepped into even more radical territory. His target was the most familiar, yet most mysterious existence in the universe: light. In the physics of that time, the belief that light is a wave was a sanctuary that must never be violated. However, from the laboratories there came reports of bugs that ruined this beautiful theory yet again. A strange, inexplicable rule was discovered in the phenomenon where shining light onto metal causes electrons to be ejected. Sometimes, no matter how strong or bright the light was, electrons would not jump out at all. Yet, the moment light of a different color, even if it was faint, was shined on the metal, electrons would fly out with great force. Here, the genius of thought experiments shattered conventional wisdom from an unexpected angle. Let us try abandoning the assumption that light is merely a wave. What if light were a tiny bundle of energy? The analogy of mist versus hail captures the essence perfectly. No matter how long you are bathed in a mass of mist, you feel only dampness. However, if just one single giant hailstone strikes you, you feel a sharp impact. Light was not a smooth curtain. Invisible bullets of energy called photons were flying through space. A different color meant a different weight for each bullet. This discovery was akin to blasphemy against God to the scientific community of that time. But nature was always on Einstein's side. Every subsequent experiment proved the validity of these bullets of light. Ironically, the Nobel Prize in Physics would later be awarded to him not for his world-famous theory of relativity, but for this paper on the photoelectric effect, the one that destroyed the established wisdom of light and opened the door to the birth of the monster known as quantum mechanics. Einstein's thoughts finally extended to the universe's ultimate fabric, time and space. This epochal discovery also began with an impossibly innocent thought experiment he held at the age of 16. If I were to ride alongside a beam of light, traveling through the universe at the same speed, how would that light appear? Conventional wisdom of the time dictated that the light should appear frozen. However, when he pursued the mathematics, a startling contradiction emerged. As an absolute rule of the universe, light, to any observer, always moves away at that same ferocious speed. The conclusion Einstein reached shook the very foundations of human intuition. It is not the speed of light that is wrong. It is the concept of time, which everyone believes flows the same for all, and space, which we assume to be invariant, that are flawed. For someone in motion, time slows and space contracts. There is nothing absolute in this universe. This special theory of relativity instantly relegated the concept of absolute time to a relic of the past. And from a corner of this theory, the world's most famous equation was born. E equals mc squared. Energy and mass. Two things that appeared entirely different were, in fact, proven to be two sides of the same coin, linked by the colossal multiplication of the speed of light squared. A vast, unimaginable energy slumbers within even a tiny amount of matter. At the time, no one had any idea what a terrifying trigger this beautiful equation would one day become. His quest for the fundamental harmony of the universe did not stop at time or light. The next target was heat. Einstein did not think of heat as some mysterious fluid. He captured it as the frenzied dance of invisible atoms he had proven earlier. Through an approach called statistical mechanics, visible realities like temperature and pressure were vividly derived from the chaos. While the world is an assembly of random noise, taken as a whole, it plays a perfect harmony. This conviction solidified Einstein's physics even further. In the early 1920s, an unknown physicist from India named Satyendra Nath Bose wrote a groundbreaking paper on light. Einstein, upon opening the letter, instantly recognized its brilliance. He boldly expanded the idea from light to ordinary atoms. What would happen if a collection of atoms were cooled to the extreme temperature limit, the brink of absolute zero? He predicted that when they are cooled to the limit and stripped of their energy, their individual independence would suddenly vanish. They would begin to behave as if they were a single massive unified wave. This Bose-Einstein condensate was a prediction that would be proven true decades later. He had exposed the secrets of light, verified the existence of atoms, warped time and space, and mastered the laws of heat. However, the microscopic world now turned its fangs upon him, shaking his very convictions. In 1917, Einstein realized a hidden rule regarding how atoms absorb and emit light. He called this process stimulated emission. It took more than 40 years for engineers to turn this elegant prophecy into a real device. The birth of the laser, the light that supports all modern communication, medicine, and industry, began with that applause of light that a single man had envisioned in his mind back in 1917. Looking back at Einstein's career, one notices a strange fact. Despite churning out Nobel Prize-worthy discoveries, he never owned a large-scale laboratory. His greatest weapon was an infinite virtual space constructed within his own mind. He called this a thought experiment. His questions were always surprisingly childlike. If I ran alongside a beam of light, how would it look? If an elevator with no windows were falling through space, would the people inside feel gravity? Within questions that professional physicists dismissed as too simple, lay the fatal contradictions that existing theories were harboring. However, this unwavering faith of Einstein's, that the universe is governed by a beautiful, perfect logic, was to face its greatest trial. In the 1920s, quantum mechanics began to grow with monstrous speed. A new generation of physicists, centered around the young Danish genius Niels Bohr, had reached a startling conclusion. The movements of atoms and electrons are not determined in advance. Everything is governed by probability. Einstein's soul rejected this worldview. God does not play dice. He stood against the very frontier of modern physics he had helped create, acting as its most ferocious critic. It was a summit of human intellect, debating whether the truth of the universe was a determined, beautiful harmony or something that lay beyond a fog of probability. In the end, Einstein could not persuade Bohr. Modern physics leaned toward Bohr's world of probability, and Einstein was gradually left behind by the scientific mainstream. But it was precisely because of this persistent rebuttal that quantum mechanics was able to sharpen its theory to its limits. And then, history dragged this solitary seeker from his quiet study into the most violent torrent of human events. 1939. Nazi boots were shaking the earth in Europe, and Einstein, a Jew, had been driven from his homeland to take refuge at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. The letter on the desk, addressed to the president. What crossed his mind was the beautiful equation he had derived back in the Knights of Bern. E equals mc squared. The vast energy sleeping in the depths of matter. If it were now to fall into the hands of the Nazis, the world would be plunged into darkness. As if driven by fear, Einstein finally wrote his name at the end of the letter. That this would eventually become the giant trigger for the Manhattan Project was something Einstein bore more heavily than anyone else. In reality, he was not involved in the development of the bomb itself. His role was merely to sign that initial warning letter. Yet, his pure curiosity had served as a guide to creating the worst of monsters. A man who had sought to peek at the beauty of the universe had, unintentionally, turned the key to the gates of hell. The old scientist would carry this beautiful tragedy on his back for the rest of his life. In the summer of 1945, when a massive mushroom cloud rose over Japan, the world entered a new era of terror. Scientific knowledge had far outpaced human political wisdom. Faced with this cold reality, Einstein began to tackle his next, and most difficult thought experiment of his life. It was a puzzle more difficult to solve than any equation in physics. International cooperation, arms control, and world peace. The same intelligence that allowed us to split the atom must now harmonize with the wisdom to avoid destroying each other. In his later years in Princeton, he was seen as an eccentric, gentle old man who walked around without socks, wearing sandals, helping neighborhood children with their math homework. Until the moment he closed his turbulent life at the age of 76 in 1955, the brain behind that shock of white hair continued to ask questions about the mysteries of the universe. People call Einstein a genius. But to dismiss him with that single word is a great waste. The reality was entirely different. He thought about difficult problems for years, for decades. He doubted his own premises and moved forward one step at a time, accepting uncertainty in a world where nothing was certain. And above all, he never lost, not even by a millimeter, that sense of wonder at the universe, awakened on that day when he was 5 years old by the small compass in the palm of his hand, until the very last moment. This was Einstein's greatest talent. Look around at the modern world. Smartphones, GPS, lasers that support the internet, solar panels, quantum computers. If you peel back the skin of the technology we use every day, you will always find the traces of Einstein's thoughts still pulsing vividly beneath. But his most enduring legacy is not his equations or his convenient machines. It is the method of thinking itself. To observe carefully, to fearlessly doubt the common sense that no one else questions, to imagine boldly, and then to verify against reality. The great breakthrough that will change the next world does not necessarily begin in a cutting-edge laboratory. It might begin with your question, which seems so ordinary and seemingly unimportant at first glance. The eyes of a child wondering why the compass needle points north. The back of a student looking up at the night sky, wondering why light behaves the way it does. Or perhaps you, having finished listening to this story, deciding to throw one more new question out into the world tomorrow. History proves it. The astonishing discoveries that repaint the world have always begun from that small spark of curiosity. The more we understand the past, the present, and the surrounding universe, the more deeply we can love ourselves. Keep your curiosity, cast your questions, and continue your exploration.